Good morning and thank you for tuning in. I want to start this morning by asking you a question. Are you ever distracted? Do you ever live your life or get the feeling that you are just struggling with being distracted by all the different little things that come up in our lives? Well, recently I've been kind of distracted. I need to make a confession. I've been distracted by, and I know it sounds really silly and kind of trivial, but I've been distracted by classic cars. And maybe if you're a car person and you like cars, then you know how easy it is to start spending your time looking at classic cars. It seems like every chance I get, when I have a little bit of free time, I find myself scrolling through the classified listings on Craigslist, looking at classic cars that are for sale in the area. Now, this is just a relatively minor distraction, but it's a distraction nonetheless, and it's a distraction that's already begun to disrupt my life. Yasmin about threw her shoe at me the other day because she was talking to me or trying to talk to me, and I was looking at classic cars. And even though, she was talking directly at me, my eyes were glued to the computer screen. And I wasn't really listening, and that frustrated her. And that's the problem with distraction, isn't it? That's the problem with distractions, is that so often they blind us to whatever is right in front of us. Or in this case, distractions blind us to whoever is right in front of us. So it's not just that we're distracted and blinded from what's in front of us, but oftentimes we're distracted and we're blinded from who is in front of us. And so I'm working on that. I'm not really looking at classic cars anymore. I'm trying to stay focused on more important things. Well, Luke chapter 10 is a story, in Luke chapter 10 is a story about being distracted. And it's a really important story for us because we live in a time where we are easily distracted. There's so many things vying for our attention. And so we need to learn to focus on what's important and focus on what's better. What's better to be focused on. And so Luke chapter 10, verse 38, let's start reading here. Jesus visits the house of Mary and Martha. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, the Lord answered, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So in this story, a story that most of us are probably familiar with, Jesus is invited to Martha and Mary's house. Martha's sister Mary is there when Jesus arrives. And you can imagine that when Jesus arrives, Mary is there to greet him, to bring him in. Martha is in the background getting things ready, preparing a meal or something of that sort. What each of them does when Jesus arrives, when Jesus is right there in front of them, how they react to Jesus' presence, how they react to Jesus' arrival is very different. It says that Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he says. And so you can imagine Mary just giving Jesus all of her focus, all of her attention. As soon as he walks in the door, there is nothing else that has her attention. It's just all of her focus and attention is on Jesus. Martha, though, it says, was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So you notice that there are kind of two different reactions to Jesus' presence in their house. One is to sit at his feet and listen to him, and so rapt attention. The other is distracted, busy, and just not focusing on Jesus. Now, I've heard this passage preached many times, and I think it's important not to vilify or disrespect or make a villain out of Martha. Because there's some real nobility, some real kindness in Martha's actions here. It says that she opened her home to Jesus. And so this idea that Martha's house and her space, she has opened that up for Jesus to come in. There is this hospitality that she demonstrates that is commendable, that we could learn from. It wasn't just a cultural value. It wasn't just a custom of first century Judaism. It was a part of her personality. She was a hospitable person. And so we need to recognize that, I think, in Martha. Not only that, though, we need to commend her for her work ethic, just her value of getting things done. This reality that she recognizes that there are preparations that need to be made, that there are things to be done, and she goes about accomplishing those tasks in order for this guest to be well taken care of and attended to. She is attentive to the needs of Jesus, and that is something that we should admire in her. The issue here, though, is that that hospitality and that work ethic carry over into distraction, and that distraction carries over into anxiety and worry and frustration and anger. Anxiety over this meal, and that everything has to look just right and be prepared, in a certain way. That it all has to go according to plan. There is this borderline sense of power and control that it seems like Martha wants to have over the situation. And it has completely distracted her from the purpose of the meal in the first place, which was to have Jesus nearby, to have close proximity with Jesus, interaction with him, to sit at Jesus' feet. And her words to Jesus are, "Don't you care? Don't you care that my sister's over here just, giving you all of her attention when she should be here helping me? Jesus, don't you care about my situation, the way that I feel, the way that I'm trying to do all these things so everything turns out all right? My sister's here dawdling, doing nothing while I do all the work." And so you can tell that Martha she's frustrated by this. And I think we can relate to Martha, probably in our workplace, or even at home, or definitely when we were in school studying and we had to do group projects. We've all been in that position where something needs to be accomplished and the people around us really aren't helping out. They're not lending a hand, and that can be frustrating. But the issue is here that Martha allows herself to begin to dictate to Jesus. The very last thing that she tells Jesus is to tell her sister to help her. Right? So she ends up telling Jesus what to do. Jesus, you need to do this. And Jesus is not one that we should dictate to. He is one that we should learn from and listen to. And so that distraction leads to anxiety, which leads to frustration, which leads to stress, which leads to us putting ourselves in the wrong position or posture in Jesus' presence, in the wrong frame of mind. Because we're supposed to be listening to Jesus, not expecting him to listen to us. Although, to be honest, sometimes isn't that the way that we treat Jesus? In our prayers, in our expectations, in the way that he ought to work in our lives, we expect Jesus to do certain things. We pray that the Lord would work in our lives in certain ways. Instead of taking the time to let him speak. Taking the time to listen. And so distractions, they put us in the wrong posture. They put us in the wrong place in relation to Jesus. They put us in the wrong frame of mind. And so often my response to others when I am distracted, maybe you've noticed this in yourself, whether it's with your kids or with your spouse or with a coworker. So often my response to others when I'm distracted is, what? Right? Can't you see how important this is? And so Martha comes to Jesus. Can't you see how important this is? Trying to get everything ready. Can't you see that I'm focused on this? Don't you care? Don't you care that, and this is me talking to Yasmin the past couple weeks, don't you care that I'm looking at a classic El Camino for sale in Portland that I don't have the money to buy, but it's really fun to look at, and this is something that I care about? And Yasmin is like, I just wanted you to know that dinner's on the table. Aren't you going to eat? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's important. That's more important. There's things that we're distracted by that seem really important. But in the big scheme of things, they're not. Me looking at classic cars. Things that seem really important but aren't. Let me list off a couple of them. The news. Politics. Stuff. Physical possessions. Sports. I know some of you will want to argue with me on that. Just drama. Right? Facebook, social media. Those are all things that distract us, that vie for our attention, that seem important. I've got to watch the news. I got to keep up on what's going on. Oh, I got to know, the scores. I need to know how my team did. Oh, I got to find out what everybody's talking about on Facebook. I got to have the latest gadget, whatever it is. All of those things seem really important, but in the big scheme, they're not. The big scheme of things, they're not. Not only that, our culture values multitasking. Right? It's like a point of pride. If you can multitask, if you can do a couple of things at once. Multitasking, though, if you think about it, is really just doing a lot of things marginally well. It's really hard to do a couple of different things at the same time really well. When it comes to our faith, when it comes to our relationship with Jesus, we don't want to try to multitask. Focus on Jesus and also focus on our job. Focus on Jesus, but also focus on the news. We want Jesus to have all of our attention. The same way that Mary, as soon as Jesus comes in the door, has all of her attention. And so, Jesus' response to Martha is, you are worried and upset about many things, right? Distractions inevitably lead us to a place where we are worried and we are upset. Because we are focusing so much on the way that we think things should be. We are focusing so much on what we feel like should be under our control. We focus on what's far away rather than what's right in front of us. And we become worried, we become upset, right? And so what should be in the center of our lives and at the center of our attention is the presence of Jesus. And especially if we call ourselves Christians, Jesus must be the focus of our lives. And so Jesus' words to Martha guide us in our distracted lives. What Jesus says is that you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. That's such good advice. You don't need to focus on all these different peripheral things. Only one thing is needed. What do you think that is? It is a focus on Jesus, right? Thomas Kelly wrote this little book called A Testament of Devotion. Thomas Kelly was a Quaker professor and educator, and he wrote in this book, and it's a really good book. I recommend that you read it. He wrote, "Life is meant to be lived from a center, a divine center. And life from the center is a life of unhurried peace and power. It is simple. It is serene. It is amazing. It is triumphant. It is radiant. It takes no time, but it occupies all of our time. And it makes our life programs new and overcoming. We need not get frantic. He is at the helm. And when our little day is done, we lie down quietly in peace, for all is well." And that divine center that Thomas Kelly references is just simply the presence of Jesus. Jesus right there in our midst. Jesus right there in front of us. The same way that he was right there in front of Mary and begging for Martha to come sit at his feet too. Jesus is with us. Do we choose him over the distractions of life, even the seemingly important ones? Jesus tells Martha that Mary has chosen what is better. And so you have a choice what you focus on. You have a choice what you give your attention to. And Mary had chosen Jesus. She had chosen what was better, and it would not be taken away from her. G.K. Chesterton, he wrote, "There are two ways to get enough, right? To be satisfied. One is to accumulate more and more, to be distracted by the accumulation of things. The other way to get enough is to desire less. Desire Jesus more and desire everything else less. Don't be distracted by that other stuff." Jesus said that Mary has chosen what is better, and it won't be taken away from her. And that is the abiding truth that we need to be reminded of in our lives. That so many things in life can be taken away from us. Our money, our sense of security, our time, our health, our rights can be taken from us. Our happiness, based on situations and circumstances, can be taken away from us. But the one thing that can never be taken from us, the better thing, is Jesus. Jesus can never be taken from you. Let me share some Bible verses that remind us that Christ is in us. And if he is in us, he can't be taken from us. Romans 8:10 says, "If Christ is in you, though your body is dead because of sin, the spirit is life because of righteousness." Christ is in you. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7 says, "We have this treasure in earthen vessels." The treasure is Jesus, right? We have him in this earthen vessel. He is with us because he is in us. Galatians chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. "When it pleased God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, to reveal his Son in me." Jesus is revealed in us, given to us. Galatians 2:20 says, "I am crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me." Christ, when he has your attention, when he has your life, when he has you, he is in you, and he can never be taken from you. And that's what brings us peace. And so if you're living your life right now a little bit distracted, whether it's by classic cars or just by life circumstances, politics, health, sports, the news, money, all those things that tend to just kind of grab our attention and run with it, let's be reminded from this story today to return our focus to Jesus, to give him back our hearts and our lives, to be reminded that he is in us, he'll never be taken from us, and that's what brings us peace. Blessings.